and welcome to another episode of Nat Chat. Today I am joined by Mike Roan from Pure Storage, who is an AVP of Systems Engineering. So welcome to Nat Chat, Mike.
Thank you very much, Hayley.
And today we're going to be talking all around sustainability. So maybe to kickstart us off, Mike, if you wouldn't mind giving a little introduction to the audience of who you are and what you do within Pure.
Sure, thank you. So 10 years at Puritan, officially this week. I lead a team of systems engineers, so essentially pre-sales resources across UK and Ireland and some of EMEA. So I'm a techie at heart, but the theme of sustainability is something that is just really coming to focus for me, especially during the last couple of years. So it's an area just which I enjoy learning about, I enjoy talking about, and hopefully I can share some of that knowledge with the group today.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. And 10 years, congratulations. And quite a few people might ask, like, why is sustainability such a concern and hot topic for Pure? Why in this world?
So there's a belief that data centers consume a lot of power and require a lot of cooling, which is correct, and also that has its own impact on the environment via carbon emissions. And so, given that we produce products that go inside data centers, it's just become really front and center for us, especially during the last couple of years. So the belief is anywhere between 1 to 4% of the entire power in the world is consumed by data centers. 1 to 2 is a stat you'll typically see. More recently, we've seen this might be more accurate at the 4% level. It's hard to say where it is, but even at 1%, it's a massive amount of power when you consider how much power we do consume. The carbon emissions go hand in hand with that. Generally, the more power you create and the more you use, the carbon emissions as a direct offset of that. Water also is a real challenge, and data centers use a hell of a lot of water. Typical data center will use hundreds of thousands of gallons of water per year. And then there's usage of the land. Data centers are very, very big now, and they're using land that can't be then utilized for anything else. To compound all of that, data is growing really, really fast, and it's now at a completely unprecedented level and just growing every day. Some of this is driven by things like AI, for example. AI is, when you look at machine learning, the more data you can put into a neural network, the better your outcome can be. So that's really driving it. And also during lockdown, and I hate to use that word again so many months on now, but lockdown drove an acceleration in digital transformation, which in turn then, drives the requirement for more data and therefore impacting our planet.
Exactly. I think quite often people, when they're thinking about industries or technology or services which generate a lot and have a massive impact to the environment, they automatically think things like air travel and aviation, when actually like the data centers are contributing just as much. And it's almost like the unseen carbon footprint of every single application that we use day in, day out.
Absolutely agree. I think the really interesting point about this, Hayley, is that you've got the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, and depending on where you look and depending on how organisations kind of view those things, will really depend on how good or bad organisations are at trying to reduce those scopes. But certainly within IT, the data centre is a major proportion of the carbon emissions, from the whole cradle to grave of getting stuff out of the ground to put into products like Pure Storage, to then using them and then essentially, chucking them in the landfill as e-waste at a given point in its life cycle.
Yeah, and you mentioned there obviously scope 1, 2, and 3, which is becoming a far more reoccurring kind of language that we're hearing across all different businesses, across every industry as well. This isn't specific to private sector, public sector. But it's interesting how obviously the shift of the responsibility to business, and are you seeing that translate into how people are then considering their technology choices and their technology roadmaps and investment?
Absolutely. So I think the first thing to mention, Hayley, is some organisations take this theme really seriously. Some will have an outward-facing website that might look like they're taking it seriously, but internally not so much. I would say about half of the organisations I talk to or research really take this seriously now. I was reading a Harvard Business Review article a couple of weeks ago, and it talked about the changing role of a CSO, or a Chief Sustainability Officer. A lot of organisations hired this persona in because it looked good out externally to customers, investors, and that type of persona. But not until recently, those CSOs didn't really hold that much power and influence in the C-suite. That certainly seems to be changing now. It's not just a nice to have, looks good externally. It's organisations that take this thing really seriously now, really trying to drive the change within their respective organisations. I'm also reading that CIOs, for example, are being increasingly incentivised to have greener data centres. And there was a stat I read a few months back now that said by 2025, over 50% of the CIOs surveyed would somehow be incentivised to have greener data centres and greener stuff within the data centres. And of course, finally, a lot of organisations now that are starting to take this more seriously publish their own ESG reports. This kind of is a report that says, this is where we are today across the E, S and the G, and this is our goals going forward. Goals very much look similar across industries. Normally, there's some level of reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 and then net neutral by about 2040.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that around like the new roles developing to like spearhead this and take it forward within organizations. We're seeing within a couple of our clients that the targets and almost the KPIs to contribute to the sustainability goals of the business are starting to filter down from that top level down into different teams across the business. I don't think it'll be too long before now when everybody will have an element of responsibility to their roles in regards to sustainability. I think we're a little way off that, but even when companies are going out asking, for going out to tender or RFP for any suppliers or any kind of partnerships, there will be questions and there will be, challenges around what the partners are doing, what the manufacturers, what the vendors, everybody in that supply chain of business will be held accountable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Hayley. And I think just within businesses as well, it's not just the C-suite that care about this now. It's absolutely getting pushed down to heads of infrastructure, for example, where in the past, they wanted less rack space, power and cooling, but this is from a slightly different angle. It's just the whole rack space and not having enough. And now they're very much more interested in the cost of that power and also the impact it's having on the planet, which is a great thing for all of us.
Yeah. And it kind of takes us nicely in because obviously, like you said, people before were looking for like less rack space and from maybe like driven by a cost perspective, or when they were looking at data center refreshes, speed would be like top of the agenda. And now sustainability is being considered. But how has Pure balance that in regards to incorporating what businesses want from a sustainable side, but also not compromising on the speed and the deduping and the features and the functionalities of Pure?
Yeah, great question. I think, first of all, things like performance are a given now. When we came to market with this all-flash array thing 14 years ago now, it was pretty new. Not many people really knew what it was. But the whole play at the time was absolutely performance and also reducing your rack space, power and cooling at the time. It's interesting to see how that has changed over the period of certainly my time at Pure, but actually it's a message that's starting to reappear with Flash getting to a certain price point and the whole sustainability drive towards having greener data centers. We're now seeing that a lot of kind of tier 2, tier 3 stories that was typically based on hard disk drives are now also switching to Flash. As data's grown, as we mentioned, we've got to try and always physically crunch down the rack space we're taking up, but also the power used by that stuff in the data center. At Pure, we have it's a marketing number, but it's definitely verified and backed up. We have an 85% decrease in power and cooling versus several competitors in the market. And we're working as part of our own ESG initiatives to try and decrease that. I mentioned earlier on, less power and cooling means less water, less carbon emissions, less physical rack space. And one other important point I think worth mentioning is e-waste. So assuming we chuck away about 50 million tons of e-waste every year, not all of that is storage, of course, of infrastructure, but just electronic waste in general. And we've got to do a much better job of using it for longer or recycling the materials within that in some way. And so Pure has something called Evergreen Forever, where ultimately you might change components out over a given time, but you never kind of chuck away lock, stock, everything you've got. This kind of means that you're actually, the e-waste from an X70, for example, is typically 25% versus 200% from other vendors. Now, I say 200% because storage array might last you 5 years. So you might then get rid of that array in 5 years, have it for another 5 years on a new array. That's the 200%. Whereas with Pure, it will typically last well in excess of 10 years. But there might be some components that are being changed out along the way to upgrade it as part of their subscription services. And then you mentioned, Hayley, just finally one point, data reduction. Data reduction is really key, especially when you look at the public cloud. Doesn't do data reduction very well, at least. And the real simple form here is you can reduce your data by even 2 to 1, 3 to 1, or 4 to 1. That's half the kit, or maybe the quarter of the physical kit you might actually need.
Yes, I remember our CTO at Natilik, we run off Pure, and when he first did the data center refresh years ago, bringing in Pure into our stack, he was very skeptical on the deduplication kind of rate, and was just like, no, this can't be possible, but was really kind of pleasantly surprised when it hit that and actually exceeded that. So I do think that it's a bit of like an unsung hero in the transformation that you can see in regards to your storage kind of strategy. And there has been something which has come out recently which got me very excited. I know it got announced at a little bit more focus in the Pure Accelerate this year, is the energy SLA. Now that is something which I haven't heard a storage provider to do yet. So talk us through it a little bit. What is it?
Yeah, so you've got a portal into your single array or your fleet of arrays from Pure called Pure One, and we're always adding features to that. And one of the latest features is the energy SLA. So you can go into Pure One, it's read only. You can access it from anywhere in the world with the right credentials, and you can ultimately see what your storage arrays are using real time in terms of power, and then the carbon emissions associated with that as well. And the thing about this whole sustainability agenda is greenwashing is prevalent, where organisations say they are doing something to do with sustainability and actually scratch under the surface, and it's really not that strong. So what we're kind of trying to do here is put our money where our mouth is. We're saying we're really, really efficient. We're willing to kind of show that in a GUI that can be accessed anywhere in the world. And if we fall outside of the watts per terabyte that we say that particular array or fleet will use, we'll try and have some remediation, of course, or if not, we'll place service credits against that. So it's just really saying we really believe in this, and if it goes outside of certain parameters, we'll make good on it.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, like you say, put your money where your mouth is, and be held accountable for the statements that you're putting out into the market. There is quite a lot of greenwashing and greening of logos, but it's nice to see the steps being made for that accountability proof point.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then final question before we wrap up for today. What do you think it's going to look like in 5 years' time? If I give you the crystal ball.
Wow, I think certainly almost all businesses will be taking this more seriously. It is good business to take this seriously. First and foremost, it can save a lot of money. Certainly, the way the cost of electricity has gone recently, data centers are not immune to that. But I'd like to see most organisations taking it seriously. I would like to see organisations like Pure and others that have already introduced their ESG reports to really be moving towards those goals at pace. 5 years from now, we'll be about 2 years away from the 2030 goals that a lot of organisations have set. And so it'd be very disappointing if we got to that stage and actually a large majority of businesses never really reach that goal. What I'd like to see is they reach some goals and actually they're starting to accelerate towards the 2040 goals and actually trying to bring them forward. I'd like to think that is going to happen. There's so much focus on that. There's so many regulations coming in to kind of force the hand of organisations. And actually, if you just look at hiring great talent into your organisation, if you haven't got a great ESG story, that's hard, especially the younger generation. If you're looking for to get some sort of investment in your organisation, whether it's a public or you want to go, if you're private, want to go public, there's a lot of focus on this theme now. So you haven't got a good story around it, it's not good for business. But ultimately, I think as this theme comes in focus for us just as human beings, I think we're all trying to do a little bit more. and we can't all do it overnight. Some people stop using plastic bottles, for example, and they build from there. But if we keep kind of just peeling the onion at a good rate, I think we'll be in a much better position as humans in the next 5 years, still with lots of work to do, of course.
Brilliant. I couldn't agree more. Right. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for joining us today. It's been really insightful, and I hope that we will meet again on Nat Chat before the 5 years is up.
Sounds great. Thanks, Hayley.
Thank you. Bye.